Hi there, good evening to you. Welcome to another Fireside Chat with Eimear, and this is our 47th one. So just where I'm in conversation with a member of the Order of Bards, Ovids and Druids. Hi Lisa from Washington, you're very, very welcome. So just type in your name and let me know where you're from. There's Jane from High River in Canada, lovely to see you. Great. And Jenna, from Texas, sunny Texas. It's not so sunny here in Ireland. And Stefan, lovely to see you. Very, very welcome. So, and hi Anne from Montreal, lovely. Gabriella, Luna, lovely. Jim, greetings from, I can't see. Denver, lovely. Great. And hi Zane. The prettiest bit of Ireland. You're from, and then Pat, who's from the prettiest bit of Ulster. Absolutely, it is. County Down is an absolutely wonderful county. If you ever get to Ireland, Northern Ireland is also a must. Hi, Coyote from Ohio. Sue from Northamptonshire, lovely. Carl from New Zealand. I'm very impressed that you're up. So you're actually, no, you're 11, 12, 13 hours behind us, I think. And Jackie from Scotland, lovely. Cindy from Virginia. Hi, Ricky. How are you? And Ali from North Yorkshire, beautiful. And Gabby, you're from hot, sunny Sussex. Honey again. Hi, Roland from Bruges. Lovely to see you. I'm from Saskatchewan. Hi, Elaine. Where COVID restrictions are going back on. Sorry to hear that. Ours are slowly lifting, we've been in lockdown for such a long time. So it's hard. Sorry to hear that. And Catherine from Edinburgh. Sunny again. Lucky you. And Maastricht. Hi, Saskia. Anyway, you're all welcome. It's lovely to see you all. And this time my guest is in the UK and I'm going to introduce him. It's Ferdiad McGowan. Ferdiad, you're so welcome.
It is lovely to see you. It's lovely to be here.
So you're in London, I take it?
Yes, obviously not originally from London, but I live in, as Ricky has just said, deepest, darkest South London. He's actually only a very few miles away from me.
Okay. And so you're from where? Ayrshire?
Yes, it's the Ayrshire coast I grew up on.
And what's that like?
Going back, it's lovely. I always really enjoy going back, and growing up, it always felt great because you live next to the sea and you have the shore and things. I think when you were more of those sort of awkward teenage years, it was a little quieter, a little more suburban, a little, not much going on. But to be honest, I don't think I really noticed the difference. So I was grand. I was one of those children that just escaped into books. And so it didn't really matter where I grew up, I guess.
Okay. So now I know we had a conversation. Well, we tried to have a conversation in Gaelic once. And you said something. I remember on the high street in Glastonbury, and you said something in Gaelic, and I understood it, and I repeated it in Irish. And
Did
you said,
just come up and say good morning to me or something, and I think I just said, La Maki Marahashev, which is about the only Gaelic I know. It has to be clear. I am in no way a fluent speaker of any language, including English.
But I understood you, and I repeated it in Irish, and you said that I sounded drunk when I said it. And the funny thing is, you sounded drunk when you were speaking your Gaelic.
Yeah, and this is what gave rise to a story which then came back to me much later, how I had the audacity to tell you were drunk at some point. I was like, I don't remember that.
Yeah, that was so funny. It was in the morning. Listen, somebody says your volume. Your volume is a bit low. Could you increase it a little bit?
Sure. I will.
I think one or two people have said that your volume is a bit low.
Right. That's my master volume going up. Is that any better?
Okay, Anne, is that better? And somebody else mentioned it. So let us know if you can hear better. Or I don't know if you can turn up the volume on your own computer, because there's somebody saying it's quiet, that I'm louder than you are.
Right. Let me just see if I can, without accidentally quitting out of this. I'm just going to try and up my microphone input. Right. Has that made a difference?
Yeah, it's just Eimear's just louder. And others say you're fine. I think I can hear you fine. You are soft spoken,
Okay.
but I hear you. Sounds much better now. Thanks, Jenna.
Right. I turned up my input a little bit, and I'll remember to enunciate a bit more.
And don't sound so drunk. Okay.
Don't sound so drunk.
That I always found that really funny.
I'm on herbal tea tonight, so there's no chance of.
Okay.
No chance of that.
So, how long have you been in the order?
Oh goodness, it was sometime around the early 2000s. I came to Druidry up in Scotland, where there was an awareness of OBOD, but maybe it was a misapprehension on my part. It felt like a very English thing.
Yes.
Even though I knew it was an international order, it just, it kind of felt like it was specifically the South and Southwest. So not even sort of particularly pan-England, but, it was this group based around. And obviously now that I've been to things like gatherings and stuff where I see people from all over the world coming, I know that that wasn't true. But that was the impression I got at that time for whatever reason. So I always kind of thought, oh, right, that's over there for if ever I want it or need it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a good way into my exploration of the muddy forests of Druidry before I actually started my bardic grade. And then I stayed a bard for goodness knows how long. I like to think, that old story about, it takes 7 years for each stage of Druidry, 21 years to make a Druid, which of course completely ignores the fact that we currently have sort of, 11 or so years of formal education in just as part of our society. But I like to think it's a marathon, not a sprint. So just take my time and do it little bit by little bit, and go off and do something else, and then come back and go, oh yeah, I can do this again.
That's the wonderful thing about the teachings within the order. It took me 7 years to do my bardic, and
I think I was about the same. I think it was one of those things. It's like, oh, I better get done, or I'll not be able to keep using the excuse of, oh, it takes 7 years to do each stage.
But then, of course, it never stops. Even if you finish all 3 grades, you're still learning. So it's that ongoing, continuing growing and developing all the time, which is lovely, because it never becomes a qualified druid, because it's not.
Yeah, and that's one of the other things that I think I got in my own way a little bit about OBOD. Like I had a genuine resistance to like an external authority telling me I could or couldn't be a druid. And, at the point where, I'd been participating in pagan and druid ceremonies and leading them and doing all sorts of things, and then I was starting at the beginning, and it was like the first time somebody said to me, oh, you're just a bard, I kind of felt, oh, and I know that's not what they meant. They just meant, oh, you're just at the beginning of your journey. At least I hope that's what they meant. But I was like, oh gosh, that's a thing I didn't know I had. But I guess that's part of the exploration, because for me, Druidry is so much about examining and choosing the relationships you have, with self, with other, with tree, with people, with, gods, ancestry, any of these things. And when you notice something like that, you think, okay, somewhere I have picked up a relationship dynamic that an external authority raises my hackles a little.
I see Wendy Stokes mentions hierarchical. The interesting thing, I mean, the order isn't hierarchical. You know, it's kind of a flat hierarchy. I mean, there's a pathway you follow, but druids are never better than or more learned or more advanced or evolved than ovates or bards. And I think that's really, really important. Ricky has something, and this is, he says here, I think it's useful to remember that an OBOD grade is just that. It's where you are within the OBOD grades as a specific school of mystery tradition, and does not have to define where you lie in the wider meaning of Druidry. Absolutely, Ricky. And I think that's one of the strengths of the order. And I think maybe sometimes people feel, I'm Bard, I need to get through this so that I evolve myself more, when in fact, actually, it's the process of, like I said, takes you about 7 years, me 7 years. Paul was, Paul Corcoran was one of my guests. And when I met him, I think he was his third time, having done the Bardic grade 3 times. And now he's doing it again. And it's like, here's somebody who wants to revisit. And I mean, he's done all 3. But it's that willingness to actually have another look. That's what it's about.
One of the things that I liken it to, because I get asked a lot by people fairly new to Druidry about the order, and I always do. I'm being very candid with you about the things which got in my way, or maybe I had the wrong impression of.
Yeah.
But I do actually think it's one of the better courses out there, because it gives you things which you can return to. And I hear that a lot, that people say like, oh, I'm popping through some of my Bardic Guernsey again, because I just want to do it. And I liken it very much, instead of thinking of like the hierarchy of you start at 1 grade and you ascend up.
Yeah.
If you do like a movement practice like yoga, which is obviously just about the movement practice, but yes, you can have a sort of beginner friendly class, or you can do a very advanced thing where you're doing like physically demanding poses. But there's also an element that, at the beginning and end of it, you start in Shavasana, which is lying down like a corpse.
That's right. And how profound that.
You can do Tadasana, which is standing up straight like a mountain. And you can have been doing this for many, many years and be a teacher, or a master, or whatever that tradition might say, but you're still coming to that very simple activity, and you're having a humility with yourself and a gentleness with yourself to say, right, let's see what I get out of this today. Let's see what chanting Awans does for me today that it didn't do on a different time. And that, I think, in whatever strand of Druidry you're in, has been one of the things for me, that I have been a Druid for 20 some years, and it's explained to me what my relationship with the world in it was. One of those things that when I came to it, I was like, oh, this is talking in ways that make real sense to me. This describes how I see the world, and it still does, except the fact the way I see the world has changed enormously in 20 some years. But there's still enough there of returning that it still describes the way I see the world.
Ricky has another comment. Thank you, Ricky, for all your comments. Is every year you could easily just undertake a reflection on how you identify with the elements and come back with new answers and understanding, a basic exercise in the Bardic grades, which could be reviewed and revised and take on a new linear connection each time. I think that's so true, Ricky. Mm-hmm. And then Beth says, it's worth taking your time in order to get the full experience from each course. I find the inner aspect of the lessons can't be forced. Absolutely, Beth. It all just has to be realized in its own time. And I think that is so, so true. Somebody else mentioned it's the journey, not the destination. And to be able,
absolutely.
To be able to sit with various exercises, like, I mean, when you mentioned the yoga postures, I remember when I lived in Lesotho, I was doing yoga. It was, I think maybe hatha yoga. And we had this teacher came from India, and all he had us doing was shavasana. And I thought, oh, for God's sake, I thought this famous teacher now was going to have us doing, standing on our heads or whatever. I mean, this is my own ignorance and arrogance, and I knew nothing, absolutely, when I think about it. And he was having us lie down there and stretching, and really connecting with the earth. And I thought, anyway, fast forward years later, and I was doing Vini yoga, and I really, really got it. And when my teacher would say, now go deeper into the posture, I thought, what's she talking about? And then suddenly it would click. And just for me, one of the most profound postures is to be able to lie on my back in the corpse pose. Yes. And it's like I go into an absolute a place of bliss, and it's that simplicity. So I got it in the end. The simplicity of it, where I was looking for a bit more macho stuff, thinking, well, I can challenge myself a bit more.
Yeah. Oh, I must admit, I spent a good amount of my 20s wrecking my shoulders doing, endless sun salutations and stuff, and knowing nothing about yoga. Just, rocking up to classes at gyms and stuff and doing what I thought was, was doing the thing I was told, and I hadn't connected properly with it.
What's that? The Dunning-Kruger or the Kruger-Dunning effect, where you don't know enough to know you know nothing. And
it's that graph, isn't it, where you're confident. Once you know, if you know like absolutely nothing, you have low confidence. But once you gain a little bit of knowledge, your confidence skyrockets. And then as you gain a little bit more knowledge, it starts to tail off again because you suddenly realize how much you don't know.
Yeah, that's right.
Actually, I would say there's a lot of that in OBOD. I probably shouldn't go into too much detail, but
no howlers, please, or not howlers. What do you call it? Spoilers. Sorry.
Yeah. I guess in any of the OBOD stuff, there is that element where you think, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. Oh, I really don't know what I'm doing.
I would still feel that. I mean, sometimes people say, oh, I'm wise, and I'm going, if you knew how little I knew, you'd be so unimpressed. And Anne Beer says, we often don't realize for many years what a true teacher has taught us. And that was like that, I think, commenting on my thing about thinking this teacher, and yes, how profound it was. What kind of teacher, have you had not a true teacher, have you had a teacher that has really had a positive impact or a great influence on you that you would still remember today?
Oh, lots of them. But so many of them from, fortunately, which I know is not a universal case, I did have some very positive experiences with the schooling system, which balanced out some very negative ones, which was rather lucky, I guess, because it didn't put me off that sort of academic side of things. But in my journey in spirituality and druidry and shamanic practices, I've had some wonderful teachers and I've met some wonderful people. And I think you can actually find teaching in a 5-minute chat you've had over a cup of tea. It doesn't have to be like, right, I sat at the feet of somebody. And actually these days, I think I would be enormously suspicious of anyone who wanted me to do that. I don't think I'm probably missing out on some wonderful learning, but you just wouldn't get me doing that. I'm much more wary of power dynamics and things now, and aware of the negative situations you can have where you have somebody who is set up as a sort of exalted figure, especially in a teaching thing. There is you have to, I think, to be a good teacher, have an awareness that everyone who is with you when you are put in the position of being a teacher, whether that's because somebody is looking at you as a teacher, or whether you are employed to be a teacher, or whether somebody has signed up for a course for you, or whether it's just that they look at you and they see that in you, and that may be projection on their part, but they have had that. They will learn from you. You just have to be aware what they are going to learn.
That is so true. And if you are perceived as very wise and all-knowing, and I have no doubt that you are, is that when in the, I mean, how often have I been in the presence of great people? And it's not people with titles. It's, I'm in the presence of somebody that I'm really fascinated with, or really, really impressed with. It could be somebody I met along the road. Like somebody says, teachings come from the most unexpected moments. And what's this other one? When the pupil is ready, the teacher appears.
Yeah.
But it's also what can be a temptation is to hand your power over. Exactly. When you get so impressed with the teacher, is like, well, I'll see what they say. They would know better than I. That you hand over your power. And I know from my own teaching, I teach adults. Well, I did in development studies. It's like, be aware of the power, but do not. I cannot take your power. Hand it back. And we do it in psychology as well, psychotherapy. Aware of that power dynamic, that you keep handing back any power that somebody gives to you, because it's not yours to keep, but to be aware of that.
And there's not a lot of good modeling of that out there, because for many of us, if we have grown up in a spirituality and a religion, it has had that very top-down organization, and there has been the person at the front.
Yes.
Usually a guy, who is the sort of patriarchy figure.
Yeah.
They tell you what is the right way to do things, whether that's the right way to pray, whether that's the right way to live, whether that's the right way to do sums. And you surrender your power, as you say, because we're taught to. We're taught to by our overculture that that's the way things run. And I like the model of things being very much more invitational. And this is actually just earlier this evening, I was catching up. I'm a bit rubbish with social media, so I tend to get little backlogs. And because we've got the autumn equinox coming up at the weekend for my group, there were a couple of people who emailed or messaged me, and a couple of people who were new and were nervous. And I was trying to say to them, look, please see this as an invitation. So your presence is enough for however much you are comfortable with. So if you are brand new, being present may be absolutely enough for you, and maybe actually taking you much farther than you thought you could go. Or it may be that you want to have an opportunity, an invitation to take part and do something like call a quarter or bless a circle or something like that, or not. And all of that's okay, because it is an invitation.
And that is right through all the course. We invite you to, if this feels right for you, you do it. And if not, then you leave it for another time. And it's also, you've come to this place of your own free will, and you're free to leave at any time.
Yeah.
And having that permission to come and to go makes it, I think, a very, very safe place. And I think, as you describe with those newcomers, I think they'll feel very, very safe.
And that extends way beyond the actual event itself. One of the things I feel really strongly about is inclusion and diversity. So I've had, again, some wonderful teachers who have helped me make our meetings more accessible, simply by having a structure to them, making sure, when we meet somewhere, there's a place to sit down and go to the loo.
Yeah.
Have a quick cup of tea, because people may have gone for quite a journey, especially in London, to get to the place, and then making a map, like sending them a Google map with an annotation of, right, here's where we're meeting, here's more or less where we're intending to go for our ritual site, so that they can gauge, well, is my mobility or my energy levels or the amount of time I'm spending outdoors, is this going to be appropriate for me? I mean, I've been to wonderful ceremonies where we've done things, halfway up a mountain or on a beach at dawn with a tide chasing us, or actually there was a memorable time with an earlier version of Tamesis that I was in, where we went out to the Chiswick, which is this island in the Thames,
Oh,
which is basically a mud bank held together by willow and other pioneer plants. And it was ridiculous. And we were very lucky we didn't sink up to our necks in the duration it took to, hold a very brief ceremony. And that's great and all, but who is that leaving out? Who does that automatically means can't even consider coming to that?
absolutely.
So I've been thinking a lot in the last number of years about making events that as many people as possible can come to, and I've been learning from the people who have been coming. And we sort of tweak it as we go. And I'm hopefully getting it a bit more right than I did before, but I'm definitely not getting it 100% right.
No, but it's the important thing is that you're open to people who might say, actually, I found this difficult, or is it possible for us to meet whatever, that you're open to getting feedback from people based on their needs, which I think that's what it's about. You're not going to get it perfect.
No. But yeah, I think people need to be able to see that they could be part of that group. I think there's a power that we have, especially with things like social media now, with even having like a Facebook page for your group, and if people are willing, putting photos up of the meeting and things, so you can humanize the experience and you can look and see and go, oh right, yeah, I could see myself standing with that group of people. They look, ordinary and not particularly scary, and maybe a little bit eccentric, but
friendly and eccentric. Art Scarborough says, we plan with the idea of including the mobility impaired. Absolutely, Art. My ceremonies are here, so people can come, and there's seats. We have in our grove, we actually have benches for people to sit if they need to sit, or if there's somebody that has a bad back and needs a special chair, then, or, a chair with a back, it's easy to put one out there,
Yeah, but a lot of people don't think that. I genuinely had somebody a number of years ago say, oh, I don't think I can come. And I said, oh, that's really sad. You're of course welcome at any future events. And they went on to say that there was something going on. I can't remember the full details. They were having a bit of trouble standing. I have a feeling they had an operation or something, but I could be getting this wrong. And I was like, oh, well, would like bringing a folding chair help? Because they were coming with other people. They weren't coming on their own. And that person was genuinely like, am I allowed to do that? Am I allowed to sit down during a ceremony? I'm like, well, yes. And this person had been to all sorts of events, but had never seen that. So it had never been presented that unless you were able to stand for, say, an hour to take part in a ceremony, then you weren't doing it right.
Yeah, and we have members who say, I see it on the tour, where they bring their own folding chair or stool, and they sit, and nobody thinks anything of it,
No, absolutely. And I know in other events they've also decided not to use the tour to make it more inclusive for people for whom going up the tour would not be an option.
That's right. So there's that tension between wanting to visit a sacred site. And the thing is about most sacred sites, well, I know the ones here in Ireland, they're not easily accessible. They're on a hill, or you have to go through a forest, or you have to go over stiles. So if you're, say, on a wheelchair, you can't do it. And there's that tension between wanting to have a ceremony in a sacred spot and then having a place for people that everybody can be. It's that that can be quite challenging.
It is a challenge, and it's something I've thought a reasonable amount about. But I mean, for me being dare I say, an urban druid, you have to look for the sacred.
Yes.
We don't have a whopping great stone circle in the middle of London for handy use with, parking and disabled loos provided. But we do have lots of outdoor spaces. We do have places that have parking and that have disabled loos. And by being there and gathering there, we will make them sacred.
Well, absolutely. And when I was in conversation with Ricky, being in Thomas's as well, he mentioned so many of the places that you have in London, so that you've quite a range of places. Now, we didn't discuss the ability or the mobility issue, but yes, you seem to have many. And then a lot of people, the viewer, thought, "Oh yes, that's a beautiful spot. I like that place," etc.
I mean, I inherited Thomas's. I've been leading it. He says with a very uncomfortableness to claiming that shepherding it. I don't know what I've been. I've been doing whatever it is I do for Thomas's for about a decade now. But before that, when I joined, it was 3 members of the order who were guiding it along, and it was Liz Cruz, Hilda Leesons, and Scylla Conway. And I mean, one could make wonderful references to Pratchett at this point, but I would instead say that, despite where they may be in terms of like an order grade or anything, you had Liz, who definitely has the soul of a poet and embodied that bardicness, and then Scylla, who designs tarot decks and has made oracles and does readings and things. She very much was steeped in a Vedic nature, and Hilda was an amazing ritualist and priestess. She was a druid. She did that holding of the sacred for people, and within a year they all moved out of London, as happens. And it was either, actually no, I think Scylla stayed behind a little bit long, but she was definitely not going to run it all on her own.
Yeah.
And it was sort of, everyone else took one step back and I hadn't, and I was left going, oh, I guess if I wanted to be
you weren't quick enough.
I'll do it. But they had inherited it from somebody before who had started it, and I think they all met at her house, and then she, for whatever reason, couldn't do it anymore, and so they were the ones that had this idea of moving to different sites around the city. For the simple practicality of, it was, I guess, mutually inconvenient for everyone.
Yes.
Because everyone would just go, oh, well, why don't we meet at that place that's really handy for me?
Yes.
Then, but if you're moving it around, sooner or later you get one that's a super easy journey, and then you'll get the occasional one where you're, navigating up a crease in a map, and it kind of makes it worthwhile. But as we've done it, we've found places you're comfortable with, or we're comfortable with, and that seem to work for us. And it does feel that we have a relationship with those places, and that there are some that it feels more appropriate at different times of the year to go to.
Yes.
There's a lovely place in Hilly Fields where, for the millennium, they built a modern aligned little stone circle. They had a little bit of Millennium Arts funding or something like that, and they built this little stone circle, and it's wonderful to go up in the spring while the trees are still bare, because you can see so far, and it's just such a light. It's like right at the top of a hill, but it's freezing cold. I remember, going up there for IMOC and feeling like the meanest PE teacher in the universe by heralding all these people out and thinking, right, we'll make this one a quick one because and everyone absolutely loved it and was I was kind of trying to chivvy them along to make it a bit quicker, but I was like, oh right, fine. Actually, just
Enjoy it.
just enjoy not being able to feel your toes and having numb faces from the sleet and stuff, because it's experiencing the
Part of it.
Yeah.
It's not all about comfort. I know I've been to Glastonbury a few times at Christmas or at the December gathering, where I could feel my feet freezing. And then sometimes Decembers are mild there.
Yeah.
It's that.
Well, I mean, there is definitely antiquarian druid precedent for long johns.
It took me. Yes, I didn't cop that for a while. I'm now learned.
There was an account of a antiquarian druid who had designed their own druidic outfit of what, and you see little illustrations of it, and it's marvelous. But essentially, looks like a pair of long johns with like some funny glyphs and things drawn on it. It's marvelous. And that was he strode around wherever it was. I think he may have even been London based, but he strode around being the druid of,
who was warm. Yes,
and was clearly much more sensible than the writers who imagine us running around scantily clad in the middle of winter.
That's right. Matthew says, do you market your trips or is it word of mouth? How do folks know when there's a ceremony? I assume, Matthew, you're talking about Thomas's Ferdiad's group.
Yeah, a lot of people find us through the Order and through Touchstone. And I think as many people have found us through somebody who knows somebody. And we have a lot of people who have come along because they have heard about us and thought, right, yeah, I give this druidry lark a try and come along and see if it's for them. But I would say most of the people I think we find through if you're looking for druidry, one of the first things you're going to find, especially if you're UK based, is OBOD. And if you're searching druidry London, you're going to find Damasus. So again, I think the internet and social media helps a lot with that. I mean, reluctantly, I have a Facebook group for it, but I really use it just for organizing and for the send out event function. It's not an open group because we do get a lot of traffic coming to the group who wouldn't ever be able to attend. So, for example, people from the US or Australia, and they maybe feel a connection and they want to be a member of a druid group in London, and that's delightful. But the purpose of the group is for people who are going to attend the meetings. So I've sort of held the space in a different way for that and said, well, actually, there's loads of places to socialize with other druids. This is not that.
Okay. Just Jane, because Jane's in Canada, our Grove's first Imulk was in 3 feet of snow on a -10 day in Calgary Park.
Oh, Calgary, yes, that would be wonderful.
Needless to say, it was a fast ceremony.
Yeah, and doesn't that just say what your druidry should be? If you're going to be honoring the seasons, are you honoring the seasons to end up hospitalizing yourself with hypothermia? No, you're not.
No.
So do something that's appropriate, even if it means having a really fast ceremony, or having a ceremony where you go outside and go, wow, let's go inside and celebrate with a fire, or celebrate by building a great fire. I suddenly reminded of a Scots comedian called Ricky Fulton, who very long time ago had a little sketch about druidry where there's a bunch of, it's the standard setup in like the white bed sheet things, and then chanting and the beards, and there's like some, being the BBC, it was probably like plasterboard stone circle or something. I don't remember it. I don't think they actually had the budget to go somewhere, so it was probably just in a little field, and they put up a few mock stone circle, and they're all chanting away, and you can't hear what they're chanting, and then it gets clearer, and then it gets clearer, and then it gets clearer, and they're all chanting, "Jesus, ain't it bloody gold? Jesus, ain't it bloody gold?"
It's one of the things I love is the sense of humor that we have, and what Philip talks about. Druids hold their beliefs lightly, and that we have enough gravitas, and solemnity in terms of being respectful to ceremonies and nature, but also that humor to laugh at ourselves and to laugh when it's freezing cold, and to use it with humor.
See, I'm not sure if I would call that holding my beliefs lightly, though. I think you can do serious things in an unserious way. And I think being willing to be wrong and being able to fall over with a smile on your face, as it were, is really important.
And I would see that as being holding it lightly in a sense, as opposed to being fundamentalist.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see the distinction. Yes.
That yes, I think that's what it's about. That they're important for me, but not. I hold them so lightly that I don't need to impose them on somebody else. That's I think that's what I think is what Philip meant. That we're not hammering each other over our belief, the head or whatever it is.
I mean, one of the things that was delightful when I came to Druidry initially was the first group I was in was I learned the ideal that proselytization was actually deeply offensive. It was considered almost like it would be like a massive social no-no, because how dare you assume that you would know better than somebody else what their spiritual path should be. And I had never really had it articulated like that for me before, and it made so much sense.
Somebody says, does fundamental Druidry exist?
And somebody says, unfortunately, yes.
Not within the order, unless I'm blind, but I've never heard, of arguments around, should we be polytheists or animists or whatever it is, and that we hold, people can come with whatever spiritual values they've brought with them and can integrate them into their Druid practice. That we don't say you have to be this way, and we don't have dogmas. So within this order, no. But
I would say, though, that one of the things as a maturing new religious movement that Druidry and any major order has to be aware of is people often come with their own fundamentalism. And we've seen in recent years that there is nowhere that is uninfected by fundamental and radical belief systems creeping in and poisoning them. And I think that's one of the things that, as either a group leader or an order leader, you have to hold a very firm boundary against this, what's it called, the paradox of tolerance. You have to, well, if you're a tolerant person, you should be tolerant of me espousing my harmful radical ideology. No, it doesn't work like that. And I've not experienced a fundamentalist form of Druidry where, I don't know, Druidry is supposed to become the new world order or anything, but I have encountered people within Druidry and within paganism that have radical ideologies that are misogynistic, that are transphobic, that are anti-science, and that are homophobic, and all of these things that are racist. And all of these things do exist. And I think we do need to be very wary of the idea of, oh, it's all love, it's all light, we welcome everyone. Because there's a limit to that. There is a, as they used to say, a pale, as in beyond the pale. There is a fence, and actually to have a healthy community, you have to have boundaries, and you have to have an ability to say, no, that's not welcome here, and you don't get to come into our spaces and espouse those ideals.
Absolutely, and I agree with you. So I just comment that, yeah, it's that I suppose my thing was talking. I think fundamentalism exists in every faith somewhere. That's Hannah. I suppose when I was thinking about that, within the order, that we do not proselytize and espouse Druidry as the one true.
Yeah.
So from that there may be prejudiced fundamentalist people within who have certain views, misogynistic, homophobic, or whatever, but that as an order we do not espouse those. But so it's Matthew says it seems like fundamental Druidry sort of goes against the whole point of Druidry. Yes, it does. However, people have their own. Go on.
Go on. No, I was going to say it goes against what you and I and Matthew and hopefully most people listening think of as our Druidry, but we don't have a control over.
That's right.
What Druidry is, and anything which has any affinity or alignment towards an historic ideal or a national ideal or a cultural racial ideal needs to be hyper vigilant, I think, against these things, because we've seen it. We have seen it in Asatharar and Norse groups that have been corrupted by people with Nazi ideologies, and it's there's that wonderful Ronald Hutton quote where he says that whenever he hears people talking about authenticity, it's the smell of bleach and the
jackboot
click of jackboots. Yes, it's like, yes, you have to not just think like, oh well, we're all fluffy and lovely over here. I don't think it's enough anymore for anyone to not be these things. Like, so to take an example of racism, I don't think it's enough for me as a white person in a position of privilege. And by privilege, I don't mean anything other than the academic sense, in that any of the problems I experience in a society are not to do with my race. That's the privilege I have in that narrative. It's not enough for me to not be racist or not to act in a racist way. That's like a baseline of being a decent human being. It's incumbent on me as somebody who benefits from those mechanisms to be actively trying to dismantle it.
Mm-hmm.
So it should be the people outside the group. So, it's not enough to claim allieness. You hear a lot, every Pride Month of like, oh, I'm an ally. And like, really, what are you actively doing? Because ally is a verb, it's not a noun. Well, I mean, it's a noun, but it should be something you are doing, not something you are just saying. And I don't buy that it's enough anymore, especially given very recent history of the last 5 years.
Yeah.
To just sit by and hope for the best. I think we actually have to be actively dismantling these problems and actively seeking to ensure they don't infect our spaces.
Absolutely.
Gosh, this has gone very serious. I'm normally
it has. But judging by the comments from our viewers that they're really enjoying this and have their there's so many. Anne Beer says it's such a relief that OBOD is so aware of this challenge and continues to have such a respectful and flexible approach, respecting individual freedom of belief. And then Art says, and this is so true, in a room of 200 people of any spiritual persuasion, you'll find 250 surprisingly different viewpoints.
Oh, you'd be lucky if it be that few.
So that Mary Kate, thank you for talking about this. For me, Druidry is the practice from all earthly realm ideologies and individually trans up to the next level. I'm not so sure what the next level is, but it's certainly it's earth-based. Actions speak louder than words. This is from Beth, as always, and it's our individual responsibility to ensure our actions match our words. Well, that is absolutely true. That's one of the three values of the Fianna, the warriors of Finn McCool, was that our actions match our words. Was purity of heart, strength of limb, and that our actions would match our words.
Yeah. Well, for me, a lot of it comes back to, the core of many modern druidries, which is the Gorsuch prayer. And I know there's various versions of McGannig's Gorsuch prayer, but the one in general circulation, you have, the first thing it's asking for is protection. So you've got to think, well, who do we need to protect?
Yeah.
And we're looking for justice, and we're looking for the love of all existences, not all existences except for the ones that are a little bit inconvenient. It's like, what existences are you actually wanting to protect and have justice for? So this idea of, there's that thing that is often a right-wing narrative of co-opting phrases or creating phrases like political correctness or liberal snowflake or things like that to undercut social justice warrior, which, if you think about it, I would wear that with pride. Actually, I have a badge that somebody made for me that says social justice druid. But yes, you want to fight for a more just society. How could that possibly be a bad thing?
I think when social justice warriors become keyboard warriors, and there's not a space for me to say, I have a conversation with you and we're discussing something, and I'm trying to shape my thoughts, and I might be awkward and I'm not clear. So in a conversation, you can help me in the conversation shape what it is, help me shape my ideas. I may not be fully informed or clear about what it is I'm on there. So through the conversation, it's like an exploration as how do I feel about something.
Yeah, that's exactly how I operate. I am one of those person that is a discusser, not a debater. I will often have an idea, and I'll say, look, I'm having an idea and I need to talk about it, and I'm going to get it wrong, but can you be with me in this process? And some people can and some people can't, because if you're talking about something which is very difficult, especially with somebody who is marginalized and will have trauma around that topic, maybe the approach is to say, look, I'm having this thought, I need to find somebody to talk it out with, but I don't necessarily think it needs to be you or could be you. I might need to go away and do some work and do some Googling and do some reading or watching or listening for people in your community. Then I might want to come back, and would you be okay having a conversation once I'd done a bit of work myself? Because we shouldn't need to be re-traumatized every time somebody needs to be educated. People should be taking responsibility for that.
There's that. And then there's also, for people who have been traumatized, that they get the help they need to help them manage it, because it's important to be able to build up resilience so that you're not traumatized every time you hear something that is offensive, because then that causes far too much distress. So we end up with people who I mean, I've talked with people who've been traumatized, but often I get into a conversation with somebody and I say something and they hop on me.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, I didn't mean that. Yeah, but you said it. And it's like, no, what I'm trying to say, I'm trying to shape this. And then they keep cutting across me. So I can't actually get to voice, to articulate what it is I want to say. And it's that debate business that, and then debates are fascinating and they're really, really interesting in their place. When you have emotion and there's two debating teams and it's a game. But when you have a conversation and you're trying to explore or unpack an issue that's very, very complex and multi-layered, that conversation piece, like, help me shape my ideas. We do this in therapy. Somebody comes like, what is it you want to work on? And they may not even be clear. Let's shape this. Let me repeat back what you've said. And then oh no, that's not exactly. Yes, this is what I'm trying to, because we don't always have everything organized in our heads. And some people are really articulate and they can, with a first draft, flow beautifully and eloquently. And the rest of us mess around and make a mess. And it's that ability to sit with somebody as they shape their thoughts.
Yeah. And it's also the ability to realize that it needs to be the right person.
Yeah.
You're a therapist. You're going to be a wonderful person to talk about that with in a therapeutic context, not because they buttonholed you in Sainsbury's.
That's right.
It's all about context, and it has a strong element of consent around it as well. Of, right, we're in this conversation. I've agreed to be in this conversation. Actually, the conversation is going somewhere which is making me uncomfortable. So I'm withdrawing from this conversation. And that has to be okay.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially when you're dealing with things like dynamics of marginalization, you will have those people that don't even know that they have got these landmines waiting to go off. And you will say something, usually through well-intentioned ignorance, and you will set them off. And I've had that happen to me where I have stepped on the landmine, or I have been the landmine. I have been on both sides of that, where I have taken massive offense to something that somebody else thought was completely innocuous, but it is impact over intent. The impact was real. It's that therapy saying is, yes, your feelings are real. They may not necessarily be true, but they are real.
And the thing is, though, when somebody has become the landmine, that a lot of people are saying they're really happy to have this conversation, and somebody has been on both sides. Absolutely, Susan, and I too. It's what happens to the people who have been landmine, or who are the landmine, have gone up and they're hurt. It's around, for them, what my wish would be for people to get help to be able to manage that better. Because if you get, like I said earlier, if you keep re-traumatized all the time, you spend the rest of your life being a victim in some way and in pain.
Yeah.
And it's around finding support for people to unpack the complexity of that as well. I think is really, really important. Jamie, hi Jamie, lovely to see you. There's such a lack of wanting to understand others now. Seems like everyone is just wanting to win and not converse. You make a very good point that, and this is what the debating bit is, that, there's a winner and a loser, when in a conversation it should be a mutual sharing and a curiosity and a fascination to want to know and to have an idea what it's like to, for that, listening to that person from their experience.
Yeah, and it is the listening to people's experience, and that's one of the big stories of marginalization, is not being listened to or not being believed. Of people saying, "Oh, well, I've never seen that, so therefore it must not happen. Oh, I've never seen any racism in OBOD. I guess there's no racism in OBOD. I've never seen any sexism or predatory behavior in this organization. I guess it must not happen.
There's no bullying in your school."
Yeah, well, I've never been bullied, so I guess there's no bullying in school. Yeah, it's an almost comically naive approach to think that just because it hasn't happened directly to me, or that I can't imagine happening to me, that if it's happening to somebody else, they're either making it up or they did something wrong. What people often say is the "what was she wearing" argument, which stretches into all sorts of things. That's a very blanket term. But
absolutely. And that comes in many ways from that just world belief. So people who have a just world belief is that good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. So if somebody has been raped or attacked, what were you wearing? Why were you going down that street? Well, I wouldn't have gone down there at night. So there is that, maybe you were a bit looking for it there. So because I'm a good person, so I need to believe that I am safe in the world and good things will happen to me. So therefore, bad things only happen to bad people. And that is really, that's a secondary trauma to somebody. It's bad enough being attacked or whatever it is that you've happened to you. And then someone says, well, I wouldn't have done it that way. Or I think, you need to toughen up a bit, Ferdiad, you're a bit soft there. Or, well, I wouldn't have been there. I wouldn't take that kind of stuff.
I wouldn't have put myself in that position in the first place. And then it goes further. It's like, well, I have such a powerful relationship with my gods, they protect me.
I wish. Sometimes we sleep. That is, there's what talk about hubris there. It is just psychologically, when people have had social acknowledgement of their experience, that goes a long way to mitigating, say, post-traumatic stress disorder. It's the not being believed. And Alice Miller used to talk about, child sexual abuse. I can't remember, I've forgotten the title of her book, but she would say, if you've been believed and you've been protected from further abuse, that goes a long way to your healing, so that you're no longer a victim of that. And
that's like the big sort of top drawer stuff. That's like the real heavy duty stuff. And I do, apologize if this is, maybe we should have had a content notice for some of this for some of our listeners. But things like abuse and sexual assault, rape is the very high level stuff, no matter how commonplace it is. But then it goes into all marginalizations as well. If you think of, the actual place I started thinking about it was, I started with the phrase in my mind, "nothing about us without us," which is something I learned from disability advocacy, that if you're going to be advocating for disabled voices, then it should be in consultation with them. You shouldn't be talking over them. And that's just the first place I had it, but it's practically universally applicable. But you get that in spiritual domains a lot, or in wellness domains, where if you have a disability or a chronic illness or something, it's a friend of mine who is actually a yoga teacher, and I have this shorthand of, "Have you tried yoga?" And it comes into the just world thing that you were talking about as well, that people want to think that, well, if they tried hard enough, they wouldn't be in that situation, or if they were just enough, or if they were pious enough, or if they ate the right food, or if they wore the right clothes, something, then that wouldn't happen to them. As opposed to saying, that did happen to you, I believe that happened to you, we need to make a big change so it's not happening to anybody else, and we need to, as a community, help you recover from what happened to you.
And that's the relationship. And that's, somebody mentioned, the art of conversation, is that I am ready to be with you and listen to your pain and be with you as you are. And I'm not talking even as a therapist, I'm talking about as a friend or somebody in your community. I'm willing to sit with you as you're dealing with this, and you can cry, rant and rave, and I'm going to be there. I don't have to do anything. What I want to do is witness and be there and listen to you. And that can be hugely important. But often you see, when people are confronted with a terrible story, it taps into their own horror and their sense of helplessness and powerlessness. So I don't know what to do about this. Oh my God, you know what? I can't listen to it. This is too much. They're crying. I'm going to start crying. and I need to get away, rather than actually stay there.
Yeah.
Because they're living with it, they can't run away. And even you as a friend to be able to sit with them, I think can be hugely important.
And there's a lot to that, because it goes both ways. One of the really useful and powerful things that a friend said to me once when I was going through a rough patch was that, aside from validating, saying, look, it's okay to not be okay, was that they said, I'm not going to say that, I'm always there for you, ring me anytime you need anything. I'm not going to say that, but I am going to say, I want to be there for you when I can be there for you. And that was enormously powerful, because it made me frame us focus on what I was taking to the other person and how to do that in a way that was healthy for both of us. Because I think sometimes you do just spiral around and tell each other mutual tales of your own trauma until you dissolve into a puddle. And maybe that is the start of something, but I don't think it's ever going to be the end of something. You need that reconstitution thing. It's like that cycle within praxis of knowledge and learning, and then application, but then the third thing of reflection, or
Yes.
reflection and integration, which I always rather liked, because it's like a druidic triad, but
And it also takes you off that spiral of, it helps you move forward.
Mm-hmm.
The thing you're talking about, we both share our miseries, that can be really helpful. But if we're both constantly sharing our anger and our victimhood, we can often stay stuck there, and then we feed it each other, and then we stay stuck. It's about being able to hear, be heard, and I suppose some people are easy to listen to and can feel heard, and others don't feel heard enough. And I suppose keep asking to be heard and keep talking until they feel they've been heard. It can be quite a complex one.
Yeah, I think creating the relationships you want in life can be very difficult. Creating a relationship with somebody where you say, look, I need a bit of validation here.
Yes.
And it can be, hey, I need you to tell me you love me, or I need you to tell me I'm not broken. It can be from, I don't even think those are binary states of one one state or another, but it can be in all sorts of different areas. Or I need you to validate that, yes, I am broken, but I am worthy of love.
Yeah.
One of the things I get really annoyed about is the toxic positivity movement. All that kind of, oh, how do you expect somebody else to love you if you can't love yourself? Nonsense. And it's like, everyone is deserving of love.
Well, we were born, I think, at the center of our own universe. But if we haven't experienced that love as infants from our parents, if we have our parents with us, or our primary caretakers, if we haven't experienced that, then we don't grow. I mean, they've shown research in orphanages, babies who don't get don't get emotional love from their carers, don't get good care, the death rate is high.
Yeah. And even things like physical touch, which I think is very interesting and we're going to feel for years to come, how touch starved everyone's been over the last 18 months. But there's all these, I remember having a science background, it's quite interesting, because you read things and you can often read between the lines of when you read a science paper and it says, this was done in a laboratory condition, and you kind of go, hang on, that means you did something to these laboratory animals. And it's quite often, especially when you go a bit further back, it can be quite horrifying. But I remember reading accounts of experiments into touch starvation where they used newborn primates and
the Harlow experiment with the terry cloth monkeys, mothers, the wire monkeys?
No. This was one's this book by, I think it's Montague, called Touch and Touching, and it's all about how it's like different responses, social, cultural, medical, to touch therapy, like massage, and having a back massage therapy. I'd read it in that phase of my life, and it was things like, right, when if you take an infant animal away from its mother and leave it without being touched, or in some cases licked or groomed or any of these behaviors, then its organs don't develop properly. Its nervous system don't develop properly. It becomes, these things are enormously important, not just in a purely mechanical thing. Then we have the whole overlay of, like you say, of feeling that importance and feeling that nurture, and that's within the family. And then, in a wider sense, if you've got a society that doesn't value, or that just constant messaging of your lack of worth or invisibility from a culture, where you don't see yourself represented in your culture, that's another form of that starvation. And it is,
and it heightens your sense of isolation within that space. Yeah. So you told me you have a special interest in natural medicine.
Yes, that's sort of one of my big hobbies and loves and interests, is anything that comes out of the kitchen and anything that comes out of the ground, basically. So I trained in massage therapy, I trained in sports therapy, aromatherapy. I've done some courses in herbalism, but I've never done the sort of full medical herbalist training, which I would have loved to do, but there was never a time where I had the money to go and do a 3 or a 4 year degree. But it's something which I absolutely adore and is very important to me.
Okay, somebody's saying my volume is still too high. I'm going to turn mine down just to. I've turned it down a little bit. I hope that's okay. I don't know if that's. I'm always afraid of doing it too much, because generally my volume is okay. So Ellie, I hope that's okay. Sorry, Ferdiad, go on.
No. It's okay. I was just having a quick panic to look at my my control things in case my volume setting had slipped down or something. Is it you that's too loud, or is it me that's too quiet?
Well, it's one or the other. So anyway, I've lowered mine. I hope that helps, Ellie. Just to make it, because it's still very loud. Okay, that's Faith. See, some people don't have an issue with this. I'm going to turn it down a little bit more and see what I can do. Okay, I hope that's. Oh, thanks, Ellie. It's a bit better. All right, good.
Right.
Egg.
What's interesting is that through these, you and I sound the same volume, so it's very difficult for me.
I'm the same. I'm the same. So
but everyone's system's gonna interact a little bit differently. I suppose it is that everyone perceives the world slightly differently, but we can do our best to make ourselves understood.
Yes, because some are saying you're still too low, but I think it's more about Eimear being too loud. Anyway, I've tried to do it. Sounds okay. Yeah, I don't know what to do. Sorry about this. My apologies. Such as
and mine as well, if it's anything to do with.
I'm no sound engineer. You see, if we were both too loud, people could turn down the volume on their sets. But when we're both different, it's difficult. Anyway, so I remember, with your thanks, Chris. It sounds good to you. That's great. Anyway, it's. Could you sit closer to the microphone? Bronwyn is suggesting.
Yeah, I can do that. Actually, that's the microphone there, so I'm pretty close, but I can scooch in a little bit more.
Okay, I remember you. I met you in Glastonbury at a summer gathering, but I remember the last time we actually spoke, it physically was 2015 at a Druid camp.
And I was astonished that it was that long ago.
I know. And I brought my daughter, who was 14, and
Yes.
Clutch, who's another member of the order. She brought her daughter, who's maybe 15 at the time. And it was fascinating because we took the girls to, you had a tea party with these wonderful cakes and fancy teapots. Do you remember? In a big tent?
Gosh, yes, that was that was the Druid tea party, which I think that was the its unofficial name was the Big Queer Tea Party. Because
it was ice cakes and fancy teapots shaped in all sorts of things. Yeah. It was something like out of Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah, it was the rainbow members of the community were sort of getting together to do a bit of sort of solidarity and a bit of announcing that we were there, but also being open to everyone, and it was a lovely way to actually open.
I was so pleased. I mean, it just felt,
who doesn't love tea and cake, quite frankly.
Well, this is it. Tea and cake is so nurturing and so welcoming. Had you had a cheese and wine, which is also very nice, it doesn't have the same warmth that tea and cake has.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it set the scene because I'm quite shy and it was my first Druid camp. Mm-hmm. But what really impressed me was your healing tent. Because you had Marcus, who was Balonius, who was a guest some months ago. And I remember Mouse having a lovely gentleman that I had a massage with him, and he was really lovely to the girls. But I was so impressed with the sacred space that you held in that healing tent. That I had been at a big festival some months later, and there was a big healing tent, and I thought, no, this is not like Ferdiad's tent. And I was so impressed because how sacred it is to have a healing space that people feel safe and held, and I was just blown away by it. And I've said that to many people, but I never got to say it to you because I haven't seen you since then.
Well, I am blushing furiously, and I'm deeply honoured by that. But it was the thing. I actually ended up doing a lot more with that camp in different areas by the time I left it. But it was the healing area that I had come on to do. But there was very much the balance of it was Druid camp. So this was only one area of it, because you could have filled one of those massive 3-pole marquees with people giving out free massages, and it would have been full, because who doesn't love a free massage? Well,
that's right.
Some people is uncomfortable for it, not their thing, especially in a public setting. But in general, you get a bunch of big hippies in a field together, and they're going to love that kind of thing. But it was keeping it contained and keeping it respectful to the people who were coming to get healing, but also to the people who were giving the healing.
Yep.
That it wasn't like a conveyor belt. It wasn't. It was deliberately free. There are other festivals where you go in and it can be a pay what you want thing, or there can be a flat rate, or there's remuneration. But this wasn't that. This was, those people were donating a certain amount of time in exchange for a working ticket, and we held that boundary, I hope, very safely for everyone. But that included me essentially setting up the healing area as a temple. So I went in, and it was created in the same way as I would if I was doing a ceremony at home, and there would be wards and there would be blessing, and it would be held energetically. And then when we started and finished our days, we would form a circle, and sometimes we would sing a few Arwens, or we would chant something, or we would do whatever felt right just to join us together and hold us together. And what was really glorious is during the day we all sort of checked in with one another. We would look over and just give each other a little thing and check in and see how we were all we were all going. So it felt to me like a very lovely space to work in, and having somebody like Marcus as your number one person there helping
Yeah.
you out. He's just so wonderful at that kind of thing as well. He's such an intuitive, empathic person, and has the most incredible ability to get the best out of people and make them feel better just by talking to them. I shouldn't say just, because there is no just in that.
Well, as a recipient, of going in there and handing myself over to the care of another, I felt very safe, and I was really, really impressed. I just, that's so, and I still remember it. And that's 5 years ago.
I also remember I was terribly cheeky and dragged you up on stage to do Just a Druid Minute, which must have been.
Was that you who asked me?
It must have been utterly terrifying.
I had never heard it.
Yeah, that was the thing. Everyone else was like, "Oh, it's that thing that was on Radio 4."
I had no idea. And then
you acquitted yourself rather marvelously.
Against Paul Mitchell, and there was Penny, wasn't it? Myself,
yes.
Paul Mitchell.
Oh gosh, yes, he has.
Yeah. Now I had seen it. So Ali, somebody got me. Okay, she just found some. I don't know. It must have been on YouTube or something. This is Just a Minute, and I had listened to maybe whatever a minute of it before I went on. Oh no! It's good fun. It's that when you can just let go, and
it was one of those very funny things that we did as a bit of a lark one year, and it just captured everyone's imagination. And then it was, "Oh, are you doing it again?" And then it was, "You better be doing it again," and it sort of spiraled.
Because Penny was and Paul. And they were really. I think Paul won or did Penny win, but
shh, none of that really matters.
Well, I certainly didn't win, but they were brilliant. Well, obviously they'd been masters at it. They had been years at it, because it just explained to people what you have to do.
Yes, for those not sure, there's a very long-running radio show on Radio 4, BBC Radio 4, called Just a Minute, where the idea is you are given a topic and you have to talk for just a minute without hesitation, repetition, or deviation. And it's such a simple concept, but it is fiendishly difficult. And all I can say is I was glad that I was the chairperson and not one of the contestants, because there's no way I would have been as witty and erudite as everyone, including your good self, on it. But it ran for years and years on the radio with Nicholas Parsons hosting, and he very sadly died within the last year or so. And it's going to be taken over by Sue Perkins, I believe, or that may have started already. I'm a little bit out.
Oh, so it's still going, because you.
Yeah. We only did it something like 3 or 4 times at camp, like once a year. But you would have known it from the likes of Paul Mitchell and Penny Billington, who were just as urbane and witty as Clement Freud, or someone like that was doing it, or Paul Martin, that had been doing it for years and years professionally.
Oh, because I've just done it now. I've hesitated. I'd have lost. Or you go, or you say it again. Just hilarious. And then you can challenge people if they're telling a lie. Is that it?
Well, no,
that was an addition.
The panelists, the chair doesn't adjudicate anything other than a challenge. So if you hear somebody hesitate, you kind of buzz in, or we had like rattles or something, I can't quite remember, to say, right, that was a hesitation, or that was a deviation, or that was a repetition. I've just done before. So it takes all of the things that you rely on in social communication and tells you you're not allowed to do them.
Art Scarborough, Art is in New Orleans. We've done that just for fun. I'd love to hear a radio version. Okay.
Yeah. Well, this was in the middle of a field, so it was not recorded. I think a couple of people put up like little clips of it up on YouTube for a bit, but I have no idea if they're still out there.
Hilarious. Yeah. For me, it would be worth going to Druid Camp again just for that.
Someone has just said, I am stressed just hearing about it. Well, it's one of those things that what you have to be is entertaining. Now, you can be entertainingly good or entertainingly bad.
Yes.
So I remember the year Dave did it, who had agreed to do it months before, and then kept telling me, like, "Oh, I'm gonna listen up. I'm gonna listen up." Didn't do his homework. And then on the day, he was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And he was hilarious because he just kept, with that great wit he has, he just kept, the audience were eating out of his hand. And he kept basically saying the exact same thing on every topic until he got to a point where he would repeat himself or something. So it would be like, oh, so there I was going down the M24 on the way to a gig in Glastonbury, and I was going to play this song, and that's whatever. He would then trot out the same story in a different round, which didn't matter because it wasn't repetition within that topic. But he was terrible at it, but dreadfully entertaining. And so it doesn't matter at all who gets the points or whatever. It's just to make people laugh.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And Ricky says the current series began on the 6th of September, Radio 4 and BBC Sound.
Oh, that's great. I will be catching up on that because that's been something I've loved for many a year.
Oh, he's even given the
Ricky is such a sweetheart, isn't that one?
Isn't he?
You need to get him on as like your sort of producer or editor or something, and he can do all
I think so. Well, actually, there's so many. And he was a wonderful guest. We both cried.
I watched it, and I must admit I had something in my eye when I was watching it as well. Yes.
He was just, talking about his time, and he was just recovering from COVID as my guest, and but talking about his time in the lighthouse when he was working there in the early days of HIV and AIDS. It was so moving. Yeah. And we're talking about our conversation about being with somebody in their pain and being able to hear them, and they were quite, I suppose, groundbreaking in that they were hugging, touching, reaching out to people who had HIV without the fear and all of this, and how important that was for people as they were dying, because so many people died in those days, and obviously now with the treatments, less people are. Yeah. But how wonderful it was for him and his colleagues to be able to work there and to support people. So it was really, really moving. Now you've had COVID this last year, and you've been really, really ill. And
yes, that's a story which actually this time I am going to say, if there's, they say if anyone of a sensitive disposition, this would be like a content note. If you've been affected by COVID or if you've had a loss, and we're going to talk about that, please be aware. So might be time to go make yourself a cup of tea, or if you're watching on replay, maybe pause or something and just make sure you're ready to listen to stuff, because yeah, I think we've been. I was expecting this to be a lot more lighthearted. I don't know why I'm in such a serious mood tonight. But we've gone into the really deep stuff. But no, that's great. You've brought it out of me somehow. It's obviously what needed to be said. But yes, I nearly died. I was in a coma for 5.5, nearly 6 weeks after developing very quickly breathing difficulties from having had like a mild cough midweek and getting tested, because working in school, actually it was just before the schools reopened in March. I was like, well, I better not go back in with a cough because that's going to freak everyone out. So that's what I was thinking when I booked the test. It was, I better just be on the safe side. I'd been working from home and I'd been seeing no one. I didn't expect that I had been infected. I mean, it must have been something as mundane as going to the supermarket, because that was really the only contact with places where people went, because I was only, sat at this desk teaching lessons, or would go for a bit like a Labrador. I'd take myself out for a walk a couple of times a day just to keep my sanity vaguely intact. And yeah, I remember on the way to the test on the Friday, I felt like as I was walking to the test centre, because they say, "Oh, don't get public transport." I was feeling wheezy and I was feeling like a bit congested, and I thought, "Oh, actually, no, this is more than a bit of a cough. This is actually, I might, this is a bit serious." And then it came back as the test later that evening that I was positive, and by Saturday night I was hospitalised. I went down that quickly,
Ooh.
and I was having breathing difficulties, and yeah, they told me within an hour of being admitted, they had to put me on like a high pressure oxygen thing. It's almost like a super powered CPAP machine, um, that my blood oxygen, they could maintain it by forcing oxygen into my system, but it wouldn't maintain on its own, so that they were going to have to sedate me to help my
Mhm.
breathing. And I was sort of like, well, I guess you know what you're doing, off you go. Um, and I kind of really didn't know how serious it was at that point. And in a way, I guess I was lucky I slept through the worst of it, because there was 5.5 weeks of my family and loved ones and friends. Uh, Actually, there were a group of people who I know an
Yeah.
enormous amount of thanks for, who were, uh, Ricky was one of them, Theo was another, Dan McKenzie was another, who they were saying like melt more wax was their kind of catchphrase
That's
for
right.
it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what you're doing, whatever the thing you do is, but just please do it.
Yeah.
And so I think, as well as a very skilled medical team, I also had a lot of love and energy holding me. And
Yeah.
fortunately, I made it through, despite some. Yeah, COVID is not a nice ailment. It
No.
does a lot of things to a lot of different systems in the body, which I'm still recovering from in many ways. Um, so you have this multi-system attack on your body, as well as your lungs filling up with fluid and you drowning, and not being able to breathe. But again, mercifully, I was sedated through the horrors of that. Um, but then, having been in a coma for nearly 6 weeks, when you wake up, your body can't do anything.
Mm.
um, that thing you see in movies where people wake up after a year in coma and sort of spring out of bed. I can tell you it is not like that. Yeah, your muscles have atrophied, so you don't have the strength to even sit up, let alone stand, let alone
Yeah.
walk. I had to relearn motor control, so um, using cutlery,
Yeah.
which, yeah, you're sort of like a baby. You can't quite sit up properly, and you're scooping food into your mouth. I mean, actually, for a lot of the time, I had been, for all the time I was unconscious, and for a few days until after I left intensive care, I was being fed through tubes and hydrated
Yeah.
through it was all automated for me. So yeah, it, it was a lot. It was not a great experience. It's an experience I'm still recovering from.
Mhm.
Um, but it's yeah, I kind of don't know what to say. It is a big thing. It happened, and it's still going on, and I've had to learn how to do practically everything again from the beginning.
So, what would you say that your experience of COVID has taught you?
Um, One of the things it has taught me is that I was loved.
Yeah.
And in after like a year and a half of barely seeing anyone, and even getting to the stage where I know a lot of my friends was like, I just can't sit in front of a screen anymore. I love you, but I can't sit like this. And it's too much, because I've just spent 8 hours of it in my working day doing it, or
Mhm.
however long. You know, it was very easy to feel burnt out and alone, and not necessarily even know that or articulate that, but I think it had crept up on me, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, and I know from various people in my close group that was the case for them, that they were in a state of, numbness and burnout, and
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
from the whole experience. I mean, especially those of us who were in a situation where we had to keep going. So, I mean, I mentioned it a couple of times, but I am a teacher. I teach in secondary school. So when they closed the schools, we were told on Wednesday, right, the schools will close on Friday. So on Monday, you're going to have to start teaching online. So it was sort of like, right, you've got 2 days to reinvent education.
Oh, goodness.
Off you
Yeah.
go. And a few false starts, but we limped along. But there was so many things. I mean, we think about, and obviously rightly, we think about the NHS and how astonishing they are, and how, any attack on the NHS we should be absolutely manning the barricades against. And all the people, whether you're somewhere that has our National Health Service or anywhere else where there's frontline healthcare workers, obviously I cannot praise them to the gods highly enough. But there were so many other things, the people who work in supermarkets, the people who
Oh,
deliver
yeah,
things.
that's right.
That what's really quite interesting to me is that we're often, you think of somebody working in a supermarket, and it's maybe not a job that is respected very much in the national imagination, perhaps. Um, and yet we find out that these people were absolutely vital. And not only that, is they were putting themselves in harm's way by
Yes.
working in a shop so that we could go and buy our cornflakes. And all of that, I think, showed our society in a very different light. But the people who were working through had a different set of problems than the people who went through all of the difficulties of not having work, maybe not having money, or if they were in a furlough scheme, how much of a shortfall that was, and all the stress and worry that had. I mean, that was, it's not a competition. Everyone just had a different type of horrible to deal with. But a lot of us who worked harder. I mean, I think that was the hardest year teaching since my qualifying year. I just seemed to be always working, thinking about work. So I was exhausted and burnt out even before I got sick, which may explain why I got so sick.
Because
And
you,
so feeling that amount of love when I came around, and realizing that people would have missed me when I've gone. Well, intellectually, of course, I know that, but to feel it so viscerally was enormously powerful. And it took me a while. There were like cards and things to look through, and at first I couldn't look at them because it was too much. But then slowly I sort of went through, and actually there's a lot of people who sent me messages and things, and I probably won't have replied to them, and I missed them. So if you're listening, sorry, but thank you for being so amazing and lovely, because yes, it helps, that connection that you have. So I guess that's the big thing.
I think it's a wonderful thing to learn, because I know Ricky kept me in touch. So you were on my healing candle and
Yes.
held in our ceremonies. But how important, I was aware of how held you were.
Mm-hmm.
And we can never back this up with science, but we know it intuitively.
No, I mean,
That,
I could go very off the end and talk about some of the things I experienced while I was in a coma that give me a great deal of belief that I was being helped. I sort of patched together things, because funnily enough, when you're in a coma, you don't know you're in a coma.
yeah.
So I had these things very much like memories that felt realer than dreams.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I'm not sure when or where they came. in, whether that's a constant process under deep sedation or whether they're all crammed into the time when they start weaning you over a course of several days
Okay.
and raising you out of that deep sedation, whether it all kind of, there's like a log jam and it all comes piling back. But yeah, I had very coherent memories of, I mean, daft stuff. Like I remember going to see a play in the West End. And of course, there's no way I could have, because one, coma, and two, the theatres have been shut for a year, you know. And so I had this weird thing of having to sort of sort through my memories like a deck of cards and go, yeah, that one was real. That one's definitely not real. That one I'm not sure.
Oh.
I mean, one of them that fortunately wasn't true is that when I came to, I was convinced that one of my sisters had died of COVID.
Oh, okay.
Because I had a clear memory of it.
Wow.
And then when one of the medical personnel said, you know, it's your sister who is the one that is like my next of kin on my list. And I'm like, well, you can't tell her because she's dead. And she's like, we talked to her this morning. And I was really confused. And then it sort of started to become clear that this was not the case. But there were other things. It's a bit like that Wizard of Oz thing where Dorothy wakes up at the end and goes like, well, I had the strangest dream and you were there and you were there and you were there. There was some of that going on as well.
Okay.
Fortunately, sans flying monkeys and.
But... Mary Kate asked, Mary Kate, yeah, this is interesting around your sense of time. Did it feel long or short, the coma? Or do you have a sense of time regarding the coma?
I don't have a clear I don't have a clear idea of, I can't place a timeline on the memories or the brain processes I was going through in that time. I do know that I had no idea that I had been unconscious for 5, nearly 6 weeks.
Yeah. I think it's a bit like dreams as well. You know, you don't know how long a dream is.
Yeah.
You know, you might think I was dreaming this all night, or I kept going in and out of it, or it could be 2 seconds, 2 minutes. You have no idea.
Yeah. I know, because people say that actually you can do a lot of dreaming and it feels like a really long length of time, but it's just it's almost like that thing in a film where they will cut between one scene at night to another scene in the morning, and it represents the passage of time.
Yes.
But it's been 3 seconds on film. You know, I wonder if there's I don't know. I'm not a neuroscientist. I don't know the ins and outs of how these things work. But there was definitely stuff going on while I was under. Where and when and how it happened in terms of the level of sedation or the various instances where I was quite close to passing. I don't know.
Okay. So, I mean, a number of comments around, you know, you're well now. I mean, you're obviously still in recovering, but you're back teaching in school physically again?
I'm on a phased return, so I'm going in for 2 half days a week. And that is currently a big physical challenge for me.
Okay.
And a big mental challenge for me. But what I'm very glad of is that my workplace is being very supportive. And as one member of the staff said, who's involved in the sort of HR side of things, was said, well, we owe you as a member of staff the same duty of care that you show to our students when you teach them.
Oh, you know what a place to work.
I know, and again, I may have had something in my eye when I had that. It was like, wow, because that has not been my universal experience in the teaching profession. I will say no more than that, because
I'm so impressed with that person.
Still a profession I'm in, but yeah, they have been, and the way I've looked at it the last few months is that my job has been to look after my health.
Yes.
There's a little saying that I have amongst my friendship group that I was actually having a deeper conversation with somebody recently, and about how seriously I take this. And it's like they were saying, like, this is almost a spiritual practice for you, and actually not even an almost, this is a spiritual practice for you. It's something I call Rule 1. And Rule 1 is that prioritizing your health is always the correct decision.
Yeah.
And so if you have plans and you need to cancel, some of my friends will have just contact me and say, look, I'm going to need to Rule 1 today.
Okay.
And again, this is something that is not something I came up with. This is something that I have collected and been modeled to me and things. I have got some wonderful friends who will even say, well, thank you. I'm really glad you're taking care of yourself. And of course, I'll be delighted when I do get to see you. But the experience of being thanked for cancelling plans was something which was so important when I experienced. I thought, I want to be able to give this to other people. And it's something I've been doing for a number of years. And actually, I'm so glad because I've paid a lot of that forward. So this year, it's like, right, I'm collecting in on all of that. I'm cashing in all of these chips. Any goodwill that I have accumulated, I'm feeling okay to use it.
Oh, that's wonderful. Bronwyn has a question. What are you able to do to help your wellness and recovery? Do you have any?
Oh, goodness. I mean, there's a lot of physical stuff that I do. I have like physio routines that I go through twice a day. Rest is really important. So I have to tell myself, no, you schedule this time and rest. Schedule this time, and you are not doing nothing. You are choosing to rest. That is, it's not that, oh, why am I being so lazy? It's why do I need so much rest?
Yeah.
That's a different way of framing the question. It's not your fault. It's something you need to do. But I mean, I have made myself a herbal mix, which I drink as well, which will hopefully support some of the systems. Like I had some nerve damage and things, and there's a bunch of herbs in there which help the nervous system. So I'm attacking it from lots of different angles. I'm looking at the food I eat and supplements and things like that. And there's a whole other bunch of medicine that I'm taking as well. So it's not a case of I'm on my own and I just have to make do with my own skills. I've got a lot of care, but fortunately I have a lot of learning in areas that can help me. So I've been looking at ways that I can support that myself as well. So yes, it's for a lot of us, it's a slow process, and also we've got the joys of what they're calling post-COVID recovery or long COVID, where we get to have symptoms. It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Oh, it has been such a joy talking to you. The comments are lovely.
Despite the miserable, serious stuff that keeps coming on, and I have just
what people are saying. It was a Juniper says, "Thank you so much for sharing this, and so good to see you looking and sounding so well. Clearly surrounded by such love." Mary Kate says, "You look fantastic, Ferdiad. Well done." So Bronwyn says, "Blessings, Ferdiad. Gentle walks in nature, I guess, if you're able to."
I have been doing that. That was, you often talk a lot in recovery about sort of short, medium, long-term goals, and one of my first goals was getting far enough. Actually, one of my first goals was getting far enough to go to a barber, because I hadn't had my hair cut in 3 months, and I looked like Cargon.
You look like Gandalf. You look like Gandalf.
Oh, this is something which I have been now told by more than one person, that I am now completely white. I was grey before.
Oh, lovely.
White, and I have been told that I am now no longer Ferdiad the Grey, I am Ferdiad the White. Like Gandalf after he fights the Balrog, yes. He comes back and he's got the white hair. So yeah, I've gone full Gandalf.
You know, are you familiar with the Finn McCool story?
Yes.
So the druid on the River Boyne who's waiting to catch the salmon is Finn Acus, which means white wisdom. So welcome to that.
Well, I went grey pretty young, but I am now totally white. It's
yeah, I used to be a redhead, so I went this color when I was in my early 30s. But it's great to see you looking so well. And Roland from Belgium, you know Roland, what a wonderful talk. You're remembering tea and cake. Just a minute. Thank you, Ferdiad and Eimear. Hugs to both of you. Anne Beer, it's been a thoughtful, wide discussion. Thank you so much. Heather says, I had COVID a year and a half ago, still recovering. Take good care of yourself. Long recovery. If you need fresh Montana air, come visit.
What a delightful invitation.
And from Pat Booker, congrats on surviving the Balrog. Long may you continue to thrive.
Oh, bless you, Pat.
And I mean, she's not unfamiliar with it either. Pat was my first guest on a Fireside Chat. So listen, I was conscious I'm only going to do this for an hour because you need to rest, and we've gone nearly towards the 2 hours. And
I had budgeted for 2 hours because I knew your show was normally 2 hours long, so it's fine. I would have stipulated beforehand. I would have said, look, there was a time when it would have been like any minute past 9 o'clock, you would have seen me slowly.
That's it. Yeah. Well, it's lovely that you can stay up to almost 10 o'clock.
This is me staying up late these days.
Wow. It's been such a joy talking to you, Ferdiad, and it's lovely because I remember, when you were in intensive care and Ricky keeping me abreast of everything, and you were the only person I knew of in intensive care, and just always that being there, and then to see you and to hear of you coming out and getting the updates about as you were slowly healing. And it's lovely to see that you're well enough to have a wonderful conversation, and to hopefully that you're going to continue to heal. And I look forward to whenever we can meet physically,
Yes, it'd definitely be something that it's always a delight talking to you through any medium, but
oh, you're so sweet.
No, it genuinely is. I know we had our little technical check on
which is a disaster.
And you were having all sorts of issues, which I'm glad have been resolved, but it was just like, oh gosh, I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed speaking with you, and that meant that I was looking forward. I came off that technical check thinking like, oh, is it Thursday yet? Can I? That's a little reference for a bunch of geeks out there who will get that. Is it Thursday? A reference. But I was like, I want to do it now because I want to have this conversation. So thank you for letting me have the conversation with you. It's been an utter delight.
I'm going to let Ricky have the last words. Thank you, Ferdiad, for being Arch Druid Dude at Tamaseth, and you for being OBOD's Arch Druid Dudette. I'm not a net. I'm big. I'm small on the outside. Grand to hear you both chatting. It's been such a joy. So I'm just going to switch you off, but stay there because we're going to look at the comments afterwards. I just want to say goodbye to everybody.
Okay. Well, goodbye to everyone. Thank you for listening, and I'm glad you made it this far.
So listen, thank you all for joining us this evening, and it's just wonderful to read your comments. So Ferdiad and I will look at the comments too, and really, really appreciate your feedback and your input. And I look forward to seeing you next week for another Fireside Chat. And just to remind you that we will be holding our online Alban Elfed Connacht or Autumn Equinox ceremony for the Order this Saturday, the 18th at 7 p.m. UK time. And it will be held by the Driegrove from the Netherlands. So look forward to seeing you then, and hopefully see you next week for another Fireside Chat. In the meantime, have a good week, and blessings of the season to you all, and may you all reap a wonderful harvest. So until then, slán go fóill.